Back in November of 2021, it was announced that the Max Payne Trilogy was now backwards compatible with the Xbox Series X. Now, on one side, I could complain how Microsoft won't just dedicate a team to making all previous Xbox titles backwards compatible so that we can have thousands of games to play. But on the other hand, hell yeah, we get to play the Max Payne games on a next-gen console. I used to play the first Max Payne game a bit back in my younger days, but I never really got around to playing 2 or 3. Well, better late than never, but before I jump into these new ones, I gotta need a refresher.
Max Payne is the story of a cop who one day came home and found his wife and child murdered. From there, he goes undercover into the drug world to uncover those responsible, but not only is his cover blown in the criminal world, but he also gets framed for the murder of a fellow cop and is on the run from the police as well. So you know the saying, dangerous man, nothing to lose. The game is developed by Remedy, a game developing studio based in Finland, which means go Finland. The game initially was released to PC, but daddy of the GTA series, Rockstar Games, had the game ported to PS2 and original Xbox.
Now we need to talk about the Drake effect.
A friend of mine once told me that if any artist makes a song that features Drake, that song pretty much becomes a Drake song. This effect kinda hits here as now that I see a Rockstar logo on the cover, my mind starts branding this as their franchise. Now while this does end up becoming true as Rockstar pretty much took over the franchise going from porter to publisher to developer, but even when they were just a porter, on the disc the amount of real estate Rockstar takes up compared to the people who actually made the game is pretty jarring. I mean, I guess that's just the business end of releasing games. It's highly likely your game will do better if it has a highly known and respected company logo on it. I know Zoo Tycoon 2 could have definitely used it. So I guess the point of this paragraph is, sorry Finland. Now Remedy wanted the game to look as authentic as possible, so the developers traveled to New York to do research and take a ton of photos of some pretty dangerous places while accompanied by bodyguards. The result was pretty amazing, as even though the game came out in 2001, the environment still looked really good. The game tells me that this is a sleazy prostitute hotel, and I believe them. So much so that when I approached the bed and pressed the button that caused the bed to vibrate, I felt the need to wash my hands. Now when it came to naming the character, they went for the old action movie approach of a tame name followed by a risque verb for a last name. Something like Danny Kaboom, Jack Dangerous, Nick Savage, and went with Max Payne. But don't let the cheesy name fool you, the game isn't a corny action flick. The game is a neo-noir gritty experience of a man who's falling apart and plans on taking the entire criminal network with him. Now the game doesn't necessarily shy away from making a few puns.
I got your ship and her cargo. I want to meet. No pain, no gain. Capiche?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the pain in the butt. Pain to the max.
You're killing me.
Plus, what replenishes Max's health is painkillers spread throughout the game, and it actually makes me pretty upset that they didn't take the opportunity to have it spelled painkillers.
It was right there.
The game begins with the end of Max standing on top of a building before a flashback shows him coming home to find out that crackheads have broken in and he starts popping them. He goes on to find out that junkies had killed his little infant daughter, and rather than taking the obvious route of their baby jokes, I'm just gonna say that kinda just looks like a pillow of limbs. He reaches the master bedroom and kills the final junkie, but it was too late as his wife was already dead and Max lets out a bellow yell of anger that his wife wasn't insured by eHarmony. 3 years later, Max went undercover to try to find out who's trafficking a new drug that's been circling the streets called Valkyr V, which also happens to be the drug that the junkies who killed his wife and baby were on. Max is arranged to link up with his friend and colleague Alex at a train station. New York City, present day, 2 nights ago.
Well, which one is it?
So we arrive at Roscoe Street Station and my first childlike impulse is to jump on the tracks and run down the tunnel until a train hits me. We discover that there's some trouble brewing and now we are getting to shoot up some monsters and disrupting a bank robbery. Also we get to set up a train and blast through a wall. That's neat. Now a main focus of Remedy with this game was the bullet time effect. The game's main shtick is the ability to slow down time while jumping through the air and being able to fill your enemies with lead. Now while the idea of bullet time may seem tame now, but back in the day Max Payne was the first to do this and it wasn't just a feature but instead an integral part of the gameplay. Rather than walking past a corner and getting shot at, you can instead just fly from the corner to gain advantage over the enemy. Or you can just fly at a group of enemies to try to take them all out at once. But this doesn't mean the game can be cheesed by just flying all over the place. Not only do we have a limited amount of time to use it, but once Max lands after flying, he goes a few seconds unable to fire his weapons as he gets up. Meaning, if you're flying, you better hope you land somewhere safe or you cleared out all the enemies because if not, you're gonna become a bullet sponge. Now this bullet time definitely drew some comparison to the 1999 film The Matrix. We all know The Matrix, it's a movie I enjoyed watching even though for the life of me, I can't tell you what the plot is. The game came out 2 years after the movie, but it's been in development 3 years before it came out. But these two properties never really pointed fingers at each other for dumping the concept. Instead, it's actually pretty friendly as the game makes a few references to the film. We link up with Alex to start sharing intel until Alex is suddenly killed by an assassin and Max ends up getting framed for it. We run into the Finita Bros because we are looking for their boss who's going to tell us where to find his boss as we believe he's behind the trafficking of Valkyr. This takes us through a raunchy hotel looking for a guy named Vinny Cogniti. We don't find Vinny, but instead stumble upon some guy getting serviced by a prostitute.
Oh, Rico, you're so bad.
Oh yeah, ain't
I wonder what I thought was going on as a kid.
Anyway, we finally find Vinny and what ensues is a level and a half of chasing this guy through rooftops and the tops of subways. We finally pin him down and force the mob boss to tell us where his boss Jack Lapino is. We are then sent to a nightclub owned by Lapino and eventually reach the Lunatic. We meet him in a sort of boss battle, but once we take him out we meet Mona Sachs, a contract killer who informs Max that he got the wrong guy, and the guy he's after is the Finito's brother's boss's boss, Don Punchinello. The two take a liking to each other and have a drink, but bad news for Max, Mona laces his drink with Valkyrie and sends him to a drug-induced nightmare.
Women.
Now the neo-noir tone of the game sets gets really amplified by the way the game tells its story. Rather than doing full-blown animated cutscenes, which would have cost the studio a lot of money, the developers instead went for comic panels with voiceovers playing over the game's subtle yet mood-setting theme. Plus, using pictures for the panels made things easier for the developers, as if they ever wanted to make any changes to the story or script, they wouldn't have to spend more money to update the cutscenes, and it wouldn't remedy any already made cutscenes useless. Now, despite all the praise I'm giving the game, I can't be non-biased to admit that the voice acting can be a little off sometimes. Sometimes the voice acting seems a bit too comically bad.
Yeah! Oh my god! Oh god, you shot me! Ah!
But also Max Payne's voice actor, James McCaffrey, sometimes sounds like he's reading the words off the script for the first time with how bland and unexpressive the delivery is sometimes.
Jack Lapino was crazy, all right. The table was scattered with notes of demented arcane nonsense written in rusty blood.
But still, even though I say that, it still somehow works. The way the game presents itself makes the soulless delivery fitting and makes watching these panels captivating and even mesmerizing to a degree. Now the game does have a handful of in-game cutscenes, but all they do is show why Remedy made the right call with the panels. Remember old video games where the characters would have hands where all the fingers were glued together? Yeah, we see that here like when Max finds his wife's body and puts his hands to his face to emote crying, but all it really ends up doing is making it look like he's making binoculars. Now sometimes when you enter a room, enemies are ready for you, waiting near the door to blast you away. It's a pretty cheap tactic used by the enemies that can instantly kill you. Or how the game will have some cheap shot tricks laid out that will definitely get you the first time you play it.
Some people might go and say this is bad level design. I like to call the developers f***ing with you.
As somebody who's made Mario Maker levels, the knowledge that people are falling for your traps just pleasures the sick parts of your brain.
That one.
It's also these moments where you learn the importance of quick save. I know it's a lost art these days considering how many games have an auto save function, but back in the day, if you were thinking about doing something risky, you learn to save your game. Cause nothing is worse than losing and then realizing how far back you have to go because you forgot to save at some point. Max Payne is that type of game. Now after getting drugged by Mona Sachs, we enter a nightmare level. The game has two of these types of levels that features twisted mazes, endless voids, and some psychological mayhem, all as he relives the nightmare of his family's murders. These nightmare levels I remember enjoying when I was younger because these levels felt like actual nightmares. Not because I was scared, but because I just didn't know what to do. It never ended! Sure, now I know that to progress through a level I had to follow the annoying baby's cries, but back then I didn't know. I just kept going until I finally found a way out.
But that was my opinion back then. These days, I don't really care for these levels.
Oh shit, somebody didn't like that statement. Listen, I'm not a fan of these voids because of how annoying it can be to navigate them, especially with how narrow the paths are. It's so easy to slip and fall off and it happens so many times, I got tired of it. I reached a point that anytime I made a successful jump, I'd quick save my game. But I had an incident where I missed a jump, and when I tried to quickly load my last save, I accidentally pressed the quick save button and hard locked myself into my own nightmarish loop. So yeah, the game is a third-person shooter with a bullet time gimmick. The way the game is arranged is that you pretty much go room to room until you find an area of baddies and clear them out, with the game telling you that you cleared it out by showing the last guy's body flying dramatically through the air. Max Payne carries a lot of guns on him, ranging from pistols to Uzis to shotguns to assault rifles and even Molotov cocktails to burn crackheads with. Now even though the game lets Max carry a nice amount of ammunition, we do burn through it quickly. You can load the Uzis all you want, but eventually you'll quickly burn through the ammo and have to use other weapons. But that isn't too much of an issue, as there is so much ammo lying around and on that bias that by the time you burn your Beretta ammo, the Uzi ammo should be replenished. The game's all about high action sequences. It doesn't really care about stealth, as enemies will just know you're there. Max Payne does have melee weapons, but I can personally guarantee that unless you're a fucking lunatic, you will not fucking use them. The game forces you to do that once when Max loses all his weapons and only has a bat to defend himself, and it's a bad time. Now while Max can carry an insane amount of ammo and guns on him, he apparently only has room in his pockets for up to 8 painkillers. But unlike the ammo, which ends up working itself out nicely, painkillers are either thrown at you way too frequently they have no room for them, or you just don't see any for stretches at a time. Anyway, Max comes off the Valkyrie and wakes up tied to a chair getting beat by a baseball bat. The show enthusiast takes a break and Max takes the opportunity to break free from his bonds and escape, thus ensuing the annoying baseball level I mentioned earlier. Max realizes his next target is Don Punchinello and strikes up a partnership with Vladimir Lem of the Russian Mafia, who's been at war with Punchinello. And you know he's Russian because he has vodka on his license plate. Max helps Lem by storming a cargo ship loaded with weapons that'll gear him out with enough weaponry to take on the Don. He also helps Lem by taking out his rival who intended to sell the weapons to Punchinello, so it ended up striking a beautiful friendship. Anyway, Max goes to a restaurant and has some fries, but the place blows up, and now we are at Punchinello's manor killing all of his henchmen and before finally reaching the mob boss, but suddenly the manor is stormed by mercenaries who kill Punchinello, and Max meets a lady named Nicole Thorne who gives him an overdose of Valkyrie, thus ensuing our next nightmare sequence.
Thanks.
After recovering from his OD, Max breaks into an underground military research complex. He gets there just as agents show up to clear out the area and set the building to be destroyed. While finding his way through, Max finally discovers the whole truth of the drug Valkyrie and how it's connected to him. The drug was created as part of Project Valhalla, which was a military experiment to create super soldiers. The experiment was going poorly and the project got shut down until it secretly got started up again by Nicole Horn's pharmaceutical company, Aesir. Now Max's wife Michelle accidentally discovered what was going on, so Horn authorized her and her family's death by sending worded up test subjects to their house. Now growing up, this scene never hit its impact as I was always confused as to why Max was trying to get revenge for his family's death. Like, we already killed the people who did it in the first 5 minutes. What's the point of all this? But now, with years of watching crime shows, the reveal was actually pretty nuts. Now throughout the game, we keep getting calls from a man named Alfred Woder, and it was time to meet the man and a secret society called the Inner Circle who tell Max everything he needs to know to kill Nicole Horn. The meeting is interrupted by murders when Max escapes and makes his way to the Aesir headquarters building. He starts fighting his way up the building through loads of enemies, and we eventually reunite with Mona Sachs, who Horn hired to kill Max, but Mona refuses because Max is a nice guy.
Sure?
Boom! Mona gets shot in the head and her body disappears because they gotta save it for the sequel. It's down to Max and Horn as he chases her up to the top of the building while fighting a helicopter, and when we finally reach the roof, she boards the helicopter trying to escape. So we shoot the giant antenna and knock it over and crash into the helicopter, killing Horn. Or at least I think it does, because for some reason on the Series X it doesn't render any of the explosive fire effects. Anyway, with revenge completed, Max stands triumphantly atop the building as the police arrive to arrest him on the scene, with Alfred Woden watching from the crowd.
And that's the end of Max Payne, and I gotta say, wow. Part of me was wondering if the game was gonna be as good as I remember, but it ended up being so much better than I remember.
See, playing this game as a stupid kid, I never really took advantage of the bullet time and did the whole run around and pew pew. Playing it now and actually playing the game was intended, I was surprised by how much fun it is flying through the air in slow motion, filling monsters with bullets. The game looks great as it takes you to a nice variety of environments and at no point felt repetitive or let whatever place you were shooting up outstay its welcome. The story I definitely didn't appreciate enough as a kid, and while sure it may seem cliche at times, but at no point did the game make me think,
this is f***ing stupid.
Now even though I may no longer be a fan of the Nightmare levels, I do just have to remember that neither is Max himself, so the game is actually accomplishing something here. God damn, 2001 was a great year for games. Max Payne is a cult classic and it sold pretty well, but didn't do as well as it deserved. And it might be due in part being released in quite an incredible year in gaming. I mean, by the time Super Monkey Ball came out, people ran out of money for Max Payne.
Anyway, we're moving on.
After Max Payne's success, Take-Two Interactive acquired the rights to the franchise from Remedy, but still hired Remedy to make a sequel that would be published by Rockstar. Sam Lake was the writer from Max Payne and even portrayed the character in the first game. He returned to write a sequel and wanted to write a noir love story, and thus he brought back Mona Sachs. Sachs isn't the only character that returned from the first game, as Alfred Woden returns, as does Vladimir Lem, the Oscar-winning mob boss Vinny Cogniti, and even Jim Bravura, the deputy that spent the entire first game chasing Max. Now Sam Lake didn't portray Max in the sequel, instead they hired a professional actor, Timothy Gibbs, to do the honors, but they still kept his voice actor as James McCaffrey. The team really has come a long way from when the creators used whoever they could find in the studio to portray the characters.
Alright, we need another mob boss. Joey, come here.
Now Remedy knew not to mess with a broken formula, so they kept the same engine but fixed a few issues that were with the game. Graphically, it looks so much better. In the first game, even though the environments look great, the character models look like someone printed a face onto a can of beans. Here, the characters look like actual character models. The famous bullet time got some tweaks and even added a feature where if you're ever reloading during bullet time, Max does a little spin move. Max Payne 2 also begins to use a lot more cinematics to tell its story, which is fine. The fact that the game looks better made the cutscenes look good, but it did still have the more dialogue-heavy scenes be portrayed in comic form. The game takes place 2 years after the events of the first game, where Max is reinstated as a detective in the NYPD after being acquitted for his actions in the previous game. Now, listen, I understand that Alfred Woden is responsible for all the charges going away as it was part of the deal they made if Max took out Nicole Horn. My question is, how the f*** did he do that? This has to be the same justice system that let Drake and Josh go from prison because they made a Christmas promise to a little girl because goddamn, we killed hundreds of people in the first game. There's no amount of strings this guy can pull to make that many bodies go away. And I know this is the second time I referenced the Drake and Josh Christmas movie, but goddamn it, I can't stop watching it. God bless you, Kimbo Slice. We start with Max in the hospital recovering from being shot before a flashback sends us back a few days where Max is investigating a shootout at a warehouse owned by Vladimir Lem. He gets into a shootout with a group of people called the Cleaners before running into Mona Sachs. Whoa! Didn't see that coming. And neither did Max, but before anything can happen, Mona disappears. Max heads to Lem's restaurant called Vodka Vodka.
What do you got? Imodium.
Only to see that's been stormed by Vinny Cogniti and his men as he's entering a game war with Vlad. Max fights off the mobsters and Vinny skittles out of there. Back in his apartment, we go through a nightmare level that focused less on mazes and endless voids and just kinda went for the psychological approach. While I prefer having shootouts over wonky physics, I do prefer the nightmare levels here even though they aren't as iconic as they were in the first game. Max awakes from his nightmare only to see Mona at his door. She tells him that there's a contract out on both of them, but before disclosing any more info, she seductively bites an apple.
We're wasting valuable time here.
The cleaners attack the apartment building, Mona disappears, and Max starts fighting them off with the help of some of the tenants.
Yes, NPCs are another new addition to the game. Kinda.
Now Max Payne had NPCs, but barely. There were 3 instances where you had an ally, but this ally was less about helping you fight and more about you just kind of following them to open a door for you or something. And maybe a few crackheads lying around here and there, but the game didn't have any civilians or pedestrians anywhere. And this is pretty crazy considering this game takes place in New York City, an overpopulated mess that God forbid you're running late anywhere. The fact that these streets are empty is the most unrealistic part of the game, and I would know, I live here. Want proof? Here it is. Anyway, Max Payne 2 makes up for that as there are a lot more people moving around that have nothing to do with anything but add to the environment, and we sometimes even get allies to fight with us at times. Max tracks Mona to her hideout at a funhouse and even catches her in the shower, with Max doing his best to hide his erection. She reveals to him that there's somebody trying to kill anyone who knows about the Inner Circle, so they team up and go investigate an apartment building where one of the Inner Circle members lives. Max fights off more cleaners until the police arrive and Mona ends up getting arrested as she is a suspect for the murder of a senator. Back at the police station, Max gets yelled at by the Bravura and his partner Winterson and then goes to visit Mona, who tells him to call Alfred Woden. But before we get the chance, another cleaner's attack causes enough mayhem for Mona to escape. Vladimir Lem pulls up and gives Max a ride to the funhouse where he finds Mona and the two start to get pretty hot and heavy, but then the cleaners pull some blocking bullshit and the two are split up. Max fights his way through the funhouse and hides in the back of the cleaners' van as they drive back to their hideout at a construction site. From here, we split up and take on 2 sides of the action, one being Max's and the other being Mona, where we even get to play as her. I'm gonna be honest, despite it being pretty neat to see what's going on through multiple perspectives, this part kinda dragged. The construction site section of the game felt pretty cumbersome to play through and wasn't the most exciting place to be in, and considering we have to play through the levels both Max and Mona, it was a pretty repetitive experience. Now we get to a point where as Mona we have to provide sniper support for Max as he makes his way through a field. This would have been more fun had Max decided not to be a bullet sponge and caused me to hard lock myself that once again quick saving run up to a point where Max decides to get himself killed. Once we finally fight through all the cleaners, Mona gets cornered by Winterson, but Max shows up and tries to defuse the situation. Mona claims that Winterson is one of them and is trying to kill her, so she runs. Winterson is about to take the shot, but then BAM! Max shoots her dead. But not before Winterson gets her own shot off, BAM! Winterson dies and Max is taken to the hospital from the beginning of the game, man. Once again we have to evade another cleaner's attack.
Yeah, there's a bit of repetitiveness to Max Payne 2's story. Seriously, the entire game's story is literally structured like this. It's story sequence, cleaners attack, story sequence, cleaners attack, story sequence, cleaners attack, story sequence. Guess what happens next?
He escapes and visits Alfred Woden, who reveals that it's Vladimir Lem who is behind the cleaners' attacks, and he is the one who's trying to kill everybody who knows about the Inner Circle so that he can have complete control of the underground criminal world.
Damn it, Vlad!
Now besides Max showing off his moves and the improved graphics, the game also added a secondary weapon option. In the last game, if you wanted to use your grenades or Molotov cocktails, you had to switch to them in the weapons menu, but to use a gun again, you had to switch back. It was kinda annoying to use in the middle of a fight having to do all this menu navigating, but in Max Payne 2, you can now select which throwing weapon you want to use for your right button so that you can coolly just toss it while still holding a gun and resume using it once it's tossed. Also, by using RB, we can now melee enemies using our...
No.
The melee feature here is useless, it isn't really effective, and why would you even use it? You have guns, just use them. Max Payne 2 has the decency not to do what Max Payne did and did not force us to have a level where meleeing was our only option. Another big thing Remedy added to this game was a new physics engine. In Max Payne 2, you will see a lot of props just flying around adding to the action. Take this first kill for instance. See how the mercenary flies backwards and all the cabinets start collapsing around him, kinda like that one guy from that Turkish film? Now definitely adds to the game, but Remedy goes a bit too far here with it. The game has 3 instances where you're inside of a building that's either exploding or on fire, and there's just so much stuff falling apart around you. But it's done in such an in-your-face way that doesn't really make me think, oh shit, the building's collapsing. But instead I'm getting a, wow, Remedy really wants me to appreciate the physics here. Another case where the physics falls flat is the fact that enemies ragdoll when they die rather than having a death animation. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, these just end up looking so dumb. I mean, look at this guy, he's literally levitating away. He might still be going. I know there are some people out there who enjoy the fact that all the bodies suddenly just lose all their joints upon death, but damn it, I'm not one of them. Anytime I see a cleaner feel the need to do a cartwheel before their death, it just made me think,
This is f***ing stupid.
sometimes I believe the game is just having a hard time setting its mood. Max Payne 1 was a great experience that took itself seriously and delivered. Max Payne 2 seems to want to do the same thing, but it's hard when it throws this at you. We go to find Vinny Cogniti, who's been strapped into a costume with a bomb set. Now we have to escort him to safety and protect him to prevent the bomb from going off. We try to get help from Mona at the funhouse, but we run into Vlad instead, who sets off the bomb and shoots Max for killing Winterson because apparently these two had a thing going. We, as Mona, rescue Max from the burning and collapsing funhouse and head to Alfred Woden's mansion to save him from Lem. From there, it's a wild shootout until suddenly Mona betrays Max, but just as she's about to kill him, she couldn't bring herself to do it and is then shot by Vlad. Woden shows up for some reason, tries to wrestle Vlad for some reason, and then Vlad just kills Woden.
What was the point of all that?
Max and Vlad go at it, and we chase Vlad through the manor, killing a bunch more cleans until we finally corner Vlad and kill him in grand fashion. And by grand fashion, I mean we get to see more of the stupid ragdoll physics. We find Mona and hold her as she dies in Max's arms and the game ends, but if you manage to beat the game on the hardest difficulty, you get an alternate ending where Mona lives, but it's not canon.
And that's Max Payne 2, and I gotta say, didn't leave as much of an impression as the first one did. Well, let's start with the positives. Gameplay-wise, it was really great.
The game is more of the same thing, but playing it just felt a bit better as you got more mobility and movement during bullet time. Plus, the secondary weapon option seems like a small thing, but in actuality it was a tremendous addition. But other than that, the game definitely comes short in more ways than one. First off, it just wasn't as fun to run around in. A lot of the places just became repetitive to be in, like Max's apartment building, the cleaner's hideout, Vlad's restaurant. While it was cool that the game gave you NPC allies to run and gun with, I wish the game did more with it. All you really got was these two tenants in the building for a short stretch before you had to leave them behind, and then these mobsters that thought you were one of them until somebody comes along and tell them that you're not, and then you gotta kill them. It's pretty shocking that at no point, not even in the final level of the game, they had Max and Mona properly team up and fight together side by side. The game instead had Max fight on the bottom floor while we see Mona fighting on top. It doesn't feel the same. I'm not a fan of how the guns sound muted. In the last game, you fire a gun, I lock my door. In this game, you fire weapons, and it's a question if it even hurts the enemies. Plus, Max Payne 2 overall just seemed like it was having a hard time setting its mood. In the first game, the theme was a dreadful ambiance with piano playing over it that perfectly set the mood for a man who's lost everything and is trying to get revenge for his loved ones. The second game's theme is played on a cello in such a sappy way that it reminds me of those old films where actors will faint dramatically. Now, the explanation is simply because the game isn't about revenge, but instead, it's a love story.
It's a pretty shitty love story.
This love story's first half is a game of cat and mouse where Max will find Mona, but give it a minute or two, she's out of there. Now, there are a few sections where they help each other out and even share a pretty intense makeout session, but other than that, these two don't spend that much time together to justify Max's actions. I mean, he kills a fellow cop to save her. Now, this worked out in Max's favor as it turns out that Winterson was crooked and involved with Vladimir Lem, but if Max turned out being incorrect, then Jesus Christ, he just murdered a cop for doing her job. The game is subtext of the fall of Max Payne and features a cover showing Max pointing his gun away from Mona while hers points at him.
Ooh, artsy.
In the end, she ends up turning on him, and it's revealed that Alfred Woden paid her to kill him, but the game acts like it didn't do this last game, and Mona doesn't end up going through with it again. She ends up getting shot again. It's literally copy-pasted from the last game.
Now, this spawns why I don't care for this Mona Sachs love story, because I don't care for Mona Sachs.
Uh-oh, the Mona Sachs fans are here too now. For a love story to be invested in, you kinda gotta care about both parties and want what's best for them. I don't fucking care about her. See, this is where my opinion is wrong, cause everybody else does. Apparently, after Max Payne, fans were upset over what happened to Mona. Personally, I didn't care, she was barely in the game. She showed up in one scene where she drugged Max and we don't see her until the end of the game where she gets shot and disappears. That's it. Is the gaming community so down bad when a girl shows up once they're instantly infatuated? Maybe that's why I like Mario games. I honestly felt more emotional over Vladimir Lem's betrayal and Vinny Cogniti's death than I did any of the Mona stuff. I always saw Mona as not good for Max as he seemed fine, and once she showed up, suddenly everything became a mess. In the first game, after Max thought she was dead, he called her a nice girl and not really a stone cold killer.
She's a fucking assassin!
It's called The Fall of Max Payne, but considering the fact that everyone else died and Max left ready to move on with his life, it made me feel if any of this Mona stuff mattered. Hang on, let's check.
Hello? Hey, does the Mona stuff end up mattering? Nah.
Also, the game is a lot shorter than the first one. Based on how long it took me to capture full footage for both games, Max Payne 1 took me a little over 5 hours to beat, while Max Payne 2 took 4 hours. But keep in mind, these times are a bit unreliable, as I do tend to go on long pause breaks to go and scream at myself in the mirror for having such opinions. Max Payne 2 is okay at best. I'm not on the same boat as everyone else who thinks the game was better than the original. It did a few things right, but did a lot of wrong.
Back in the day, I was never really in a rush to play this because the subtext really implied that the Max wasn't gonna make it out of there. I wasn't eager to see him die, so let's just play Kirby instead. But then Max Payne 3 was announced and pretty much revealed that nothing really happens here, so maybe that's why I wasn't as invested as others were in the story. I knew everything would be fine. Oh well. Max Payne 3!
So for the third installment, Rockstar is now fully behind the wheel developing the game themselves. Now Rockstar is a company that's notorious for taking its damn sweet time releasing games. Max Payne 3 came out almost a decade after the second game, but that doesn't mean we didn't get any Max Payne action in those years. In 2008, a Max Payne movie was released starring Mark Wahlberg as Max and Mila Kunis as Mona Sachs. This movie was actually a prequel to Ted. Now we all know the trend of video game movies being bad. Yep, that's the case here too.
Some of the usual suspects here with bad video game movies, such as questionable acting, lack of direction, and this is the big one, straying too far from the source material. Max Payne was panned critically, and yeah, it is as bad as everyone says it is. See, I'm someone who likes to see the positive side of things. For example, that Mario Bros. Movie from the 80s, I really like that. So keep that in mind when you hear me say this. I'd rather eat rat poison than see another one of these.
I did have one positive takeaway from the film, and that was that I actually dug the chemistry between Max and Mona more in the movie than I did the actual games. Oh shit, they started a fire. Released on the 360, PS3, PC, and Mac, Max Payne 3 takes place 9 years after the events of the second game. Max is at an old-time personal low, being an alcoholic that's also addicted to painkillers. The game takes us out of New York City and into Sao Paulo, Brazil, where Max works as a private security contractor with his partner Raul Passos, who recruited him to work for the Broncos, consisting of brothers Victor, Rodrigo, and Marcelo. Now, while at a private party, the local street gang called the Commando Sombra attacked the party and tried to kidnap Victor and his trophy wife Fabiana. Now, Max goes ahead and starts to put a stop to this by popping the street game and does a cool slide as he saves Fabiana and then goes on to save Rodrigo. To celebrate surviving a deadly party crash, Marcelo, Fabiana, and her sister Giovanna decide to go to another party at a nightclub, all as Max escorts them. Surprise, surprise, this party also gets attacked, but this time Fabiana is successfully kidnapped by the gang. First impressions? Max Payne 3 looks gorgeous. The environments look realistic and the character models look great for the time. And after 3 years of voicing Max Payne, the character model for Max is finally modeled after James McCaffrey. The Max Payne 3, despite being linear, is a pretty big game as it was released on 2 discs. As plenty of games were during the early to mid 2010s as we were transitioning from the 7th generation as games were getting bigger and looking better and needed more powerful consoles to run them, so it's not surprising how good Max Payne 3 looks. And don't worry, you only need 1 disc to play Max Payne 3 on the Series X. You can use a 2nd disc to cut tomatoes. Now gameplay wise, it's definitely different. Max Payne 3's biggest change is the way it handles combat. Rockstar added the cover system here, so now instead of wide open run and gun, combat is more get to cover and shoot at the enemies once you have an opening. At first I wasn't too excited about the change, but when playing a further bit down the line, I realized I was actually really meshing with the gameplay. It then popped into my head that the combat had a pretty nice blend of Uncharted and GTA 5. Plus, I had the famous Max Payne bullet time, and we actually have a winning formula here. This is the only way I ever want to play a third-person shooter. Payne 3 also has a lot of these sick action sequences where Max can take out a bunch of enemies like when he's flying out a window or hanging upside down from a helicopter. It's some pretty badass stuff. Another great addition Rockstar made is that if Max ever completely runs out of health, as long as he has a painkiller, he will automatically enter bullet time and then have an opportunity to take out the enemy that fired that last bullet at you, and if you successfully kill them, then your health is replenished and you can continue to fight. This was a fantastic addition. It made me not care about replenishing my health and kinda just kept the game going. Though it is possible to easily mess up this last stand either by running out of bullets or being caught at a bad angle and not being able to get the shot off in time. So anyway, we meet with Rodrigo, who gets a ransom demanding $3 million in exchange for Fabiana. Thus, Max and Raul are sent to a football stadium to handle the exchange, but then both groups get third-partied by a paramilitary unit who steal the money, and Max and Raul have to fight their way out of there. With the ransom stolen and Fabiana still missing, the two decide to infiltrate the Commando Sombra base camp in the middle of the night to find Fabiana, which they do get really close in a pretty rad boat chase sequence, but are once again thwarted by the gang leader named Serrano. Now, Max Payne 3 added collectibles to each level, and usually I roll my eyes at collectibles. They're usually just here to have us run over every inch of a level to make the game seem longer than it actually is, and it's really all just for stats. But Max Payne 3's collectibles actually have some value to them. One type of collectibles are clues to find each level that actually help with adding to the story. Another type are pieces of golden guns scattered throughout each level that we have to assemble. Once you find all the pieces from that point forward, whenever you use the gun, it will turn gold and dish out more damage and hold more ammo. Now this I like. Give me a valid reason to motivate entertaining the collectibles and I'll do it. Plus, assembling golden guns is permanent. If you start a new game, then all the golden gun data carries over. Now this is a way to do collectibles. We get back to the Bronco building where it's suddenly attacked by the paramilitary and Max does his best to fight them off, but when he gets back to Rodrigo, it's too late. Rodrigo had been assassinated and the building blows up. With no other options, Max shaves his head and goes into town still in search for Fabiana while wearing the greatest shirt ever. He attends a party looking for info but ends up getting mugged, which was odd to me. Really? This guy got mugged? Stuck in a city where he didn't speak the language and no one really wanted to help an American, Max enters a strip club.
Sure.
It was at this point, sitting here editing out all the nipples, I started thinking about how far Max Payne has come in terms of its maturity. Flip over the first game and the game got pegged with the old blood and violence, and yep, that's blood and that's violence. Max Payne 2 tacked on strong language and mature sexual themes, which is a bit odd that Max Payne 1 didn't have this tacked on, as if you remember what I said earlier, the game had a mob boss getting the old lollipop treatment. Then again, you don't really see anything, it's really all just moaning behind a counter. For all we know, she could have just been tying his shoes. I know I feel pretty satisfied whenever I tie a double knot.
Oh yeah.
But in Max Payne 2, oh my god, is that underboob? Max Payne 3 added 2 more lines as we get partial nudity. This is considered partial? It also added drug and alcohol use, which yeah, the game feels inclined to remind us every 20 minutes that Max is an alcoholic with a drug problem. Blood got promoted to blood and gore, and yes, that is the case. Whenever you kill the last guy in a room, you get to shoot at him with a close-up of all the bullets hitting him and all the delicious meat splatter. Max Payne 3 is a pretty gory game. Mature sexual themes graduated into strong sexual content. Fucking yeah, it did. It's kinda odd that it's here though. Max seems like the last type of guy to go to a strip club. Plus, the fact that this is the place where Max accidentally meets someone that will help him in his journey seems a bit forced. I feel like Rockstar just wanted a strip club in the game, so they just shoehorned it in. I mean, come on, is it really a Rockstar game if there aren't any titties around? It's not surprising that the more Rockstar got involved with the series, the more lines got added to the ESRB rating. I mean, come on, it's Rockstar. They live on to harass the ESRB. When GTA 6 ever comes out, this is what the back of the box is gonna look like. So Max meets a local cop at the strip club and they decide to work together to investigate the paramilitary and save Fabiana. He points Max in the direction he needs to go just as Max gets to a shootout before gunning his way through the town until he reaches the Commando Summer base and he finally reaches Fabiana being held at gunpoint by Serrano along with Marcelo and Giovanna, who tried to get Fabiana themselves. Max tells Serrano not to shoot anybody, so Serrano says sure and shoots Fabiana and chaos ensues. Max is sent to a flashback where he visits his wife and daughter's grave one more time before leaving for Brazil. He even adds an interesting line.
I still hadn't really forgiven myself for the Mona business.
Oh man, I'm getting a call. Hello? Hey, does the Mona stuff end up mattering? Nah.
We get into a shootout at the cemetery with the Mafia, and this level served more like an opportunity to throw in some Easter eggs. In this level, the 3 clues that you collect are less about adding to the current game's story and more just about giving nods to the previous games. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look around, you'll find graves of characters from previous games like Witterson, Vinny Cogniti, and Nicole Horn. While I appreciate that the game did this, I wish it did it more. I mean, other levels had a handful of clues to find, but here it just gave us 3. It definitely would have been nicer if we got to see more graves from other characters like Lem, Woden, Alex, Punchinello, I'll even say it, Mona. Oh well, we get out of there with the help of Raul. Now I gotta say, I really do like Pasos as he quickly became one of my favorite characters from the whole franchise. The chemistry that Raul has with Max is some pretty entertaining stuff and I really like the partnership going on here. Max is someone who's down and out and Raul shows up trying to help him out and give him a new opportunity, and while Max comes off annoyed about it, he's still very receptive to the assistance and pretty appreciative towards Pasos. It is a shame that as the game progresses we do see less and less of it, and it may be because the game starts to allude to Raul being involved in shady business and even probably setting up Max, which definitely made me worried. After Vlad in the last game, I couldn't stomach another betrayal. Now even though up to this point I've given this game its fair share of pickle flicking, there are definitely parts of the game that made me itch my foot closer to the garbage pedal. For one, gameplay wise, Max went from being able to hold this many guns to just 3. Only 2 handguns and 1 two-handed weapon. You have a 4th option to use both of your single-handed weapons simultaneously, but that comes at the expense of dropping your 2-handed weapon, and that's pretty stupid. I don't know why Rockstar chose to do this considering how they have other games that let you carry an ungodly amount of guns. Maybe they were aiming for realism, as say you have a shotgun in your inventory but you are using a pistol, so you will see Max holding the shotgun in his other hand. But with the amount of insane shit that happens in this game, realism is definitely the least of this game's priorities. Now Max Payne 3 is the first time I ever played a Max Payne game and was completely out of ammo. These did get remedied by the fact that if you ever right next to an enemy you can melee them to instantly kill them and get the weapon rather than just waving your gun at them and hoping for the best. But something that does make the game more difficult is the fact that it took away your ability to save whenever you want. Instead there are checkpoints and these are quite a bit away from each other, so it really became frustrating barely getting through a section, not being able to save, get killed in the next section and have to do the first one over again. Another thing that really bothered me is the constant flickering going on here. Max Payne is a drunk and constantly intoxicated, and the game emphasizes this by having the screen flicker and be blurry at times. At first I thought it was just part of the intro to set the mood of the game, but when I was playing the first level and saw that the screen still had flickers, I honestly thought there was something wrong with my TV. But no, the screen actually does this throughout the whole game and it's a bit irritating. The game completely abandoned telling its story in comic form, which makes sense. What worked then was going to work in an era where games became these cinematic experiences. Instead, the game did these cinematic panels, which reminded me of that 2003 Hulk movie that was kind of like a comic book movie during action sequences. The game also has words flashing on the screen to emphasize the importance of what was just said, and I wasn't a fan of these either. This direction was part of them trying to modernize the neo-noir theme, but all it really did was just give me a headache. So glad Max Payne 3 came with Advil. As the game progressed, I didn't mind it as much, but it was more because I just got used to it rather than it growing on me. Back in the present, Max goes looking for Marcelo and Giovanna while the paramilitary are ravaging the town, killing and kidnapping civilians. He doesn't save Marcelo from being burned alive, but he does manage to get to Giovanna in time. It's the next day and Max discards the shirt. And then Giovanna starts telling him how she and Raul are a thing and that she is pregnant with his child, with Max having the best reaction.
You gotta be shitting me.
Max helps her get through a bus station where the two work together to escape as they wait for Raul to come save them. When they are split up, Pasos arrives and flies away with Giovanna, leaving Max behind flustered. Our cop buddy from the strip club arrives and sends us into a rundown hotel to investigate the paramilitary, only to discover that the hotel is the base operation of black market organ theft ring, which is why they've been stealing civilians. He even finds Serrano as one of the operator-owned prisoners, which really caught me by surprise. Rather than kill him, Max simply decided to let Serrano get some revenge on the doctor that stole his organs. We plant a bunch of C4 and set the building to be destroyed, and while he fights through the collapsing building, Max gets ambushed by the paramilitary leader, but then is saved by Raul. They both escape and Max forgives Raul for leaving behind earlier and bids him farewell as Raul leaves Sao Paulo with Giovanna. Rather than leave, Max decides to stay and take care of business, so he turned himself into the police so they can further investigate and find out the truth. He discovers that the last surviving Bronco brother Victor had his brothers assassinated so that he could inherit the family money, and that he's involved in the organ theft ring to help fund his run for office. Victor escapes and Max follows him to the airport to stop him from escaping, and after some intense fighting, we bring down Victor's plane and apprehend him. Max wants to kill him, but cop body from the strip club insisted that they send him to prison instead. Max agrees and Victor laughs, saying that he'll walk, and Max says, "No you won't." A week later, Max is chilling at the bar where he overhears on TV that Victor was found dead in prison, so Max decides to move on with his life and walks away into the sunset.
And that's Max Payne 3, and I gotta say, that's some great stuff right here. The game definitely did a few things I was not a fan of, but it became overshadowed by how much fun it is to play in the first place.
While the plot didn't have as many twists and turns as the other games, it was still pretty entertaining watching Max take on the entirety of Sao Paulo. The story wasn't anything mind-blowing. I mean, the reveal of Victor Bronco being the mastermind behind everything wasn't too shocking if you watch any crime show about a rich family. There's always internal conflict about money or some other precious heirloom. Can't wait for my kids to kill me over my Super Mario World refrigerator magnet. The game is just one hectic ride that's a blast to play through as it gets narrated by a pretty great performance by McCaffrey. Max Payne 3 strayed from the neo-noir B-movie style of the previous two titles, and instead, Rockstar made a blockbuster summer action flick with the emphasis on the flick.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'll be honest with myself, and I'm not gonna expect a new Max Payne game anytime soon, or maybe even ever. Max Payne 3 was a great game, but a lot of people don't know that because, apparently, it was a flop. Well, I can't precisely find out how many copies the game sold. Numbers like 400k to 4 million are thrown around pretty frequently on the internet, but it is known that it outsold Max Payne 2, which is all I need.
But when you compare it to other Rockstar properties, Jesus Christ, that's a gap. I mean, it's to be expected. Max Payne is a linear game and it doesn't stand a chance against open world titles. See, I'm not saying anything bad about linear games. Some of my favorite games of all time are linear. But the problem is that you play a linear game, you finish it, you put it down. But with open world games, you can finish the main story and then the game just leaves you with a giant map filled with things to do and mess around in. Rockstar themselves being kings of that. So it's pretty cool of them to create a third game for our buddy Max despite the fact that they didn't need to. The game did also have online multiplayer that is no longer available for use on console, which isn't a bad thing. I don't really care for online multiplayer. Max Payne 3 is a hella good time. It looks gorgeous and has the best gameplay in the whole series. Definitely an underappreciated title.
And that brings us to the end of the trilogy, and what a great time this was. Max Payne is a cult classic that didn't necessarily make headlines, but the people who played it loved it and still love it, and it's not because of nostalgia. Max Payne 2 might have been my least favorite of the trilogy, but it's still a good first playthrough and does have some good strengths to the gameplay. And Max 3 is just phenomenal, probably my favorite of the three games, and I can't believe it took me this long to finally get to it. It's just one chaotic ride that was so much fun to play through, and when I beat it, I wanted to play it again, which is a good sign for a game. I am so stoked that these games are now backwards compatible with the Series X and available for download at the shop. Because Max Payne is a great series that everyone can now try and everyone should try because the games are just that much fun and the story is really good. Even though I spoiled everything. And to all the Max Payne fans that have played it, let's all celebrate that this is a far from forgotten trilogy. Another call. Hello? Hey, you're not gonna believe this. They're remaking the first two Max Payne games. Oh, hell yeah! Yeah, I know. And they're also making another Max Payne movie. Damn.